going to keep you in silence for too long. And I have to rotate a lot, but it's all good. Thank you all so much for coming to the stage reading of Kazim Ali's The Secret Room, a string quartet. Yeah, the world premiere. I won't get to say that too many times. And I think this is this has to be some landmark that I should bring up. Probably the first all-Asian production of anything done at Davidson, which is long overdue. Yeah, hopefully not the last. Exactly. I got a lot of people to thank, but I'll try and keep it quick. But first, please turn off your cell phones or put them into airplane mode. Listen, I'm trying to help you out. They're going to act just fine up here, no matter what. I know that. But I want to help you not be that person. So, help me help you, please. Cool, on to the thanks. First and foremost, thank you to the Duke staff for letting us have this production in this beautiful space. There is a typo in the program that I should correct. Sound design is being done by Tyler Elrod, not Brandon Kincaid. To give Tyler his due. I work in the show. Ayana Crouse working lights. Latisha Casey, stage manager. They've been wonderful. Thank you all so much. First and then second, where is Anne-Marie Costa? She here? There she is. Stand up, Anne-Marie. No. Give an applause. She gave me this opportunity to direct. Kay approached me with this, so thank you so much for allowing me to direct this. Thank you to Dr. Shireen Campbell, and Kathy Barton of the English department for organizing this. This was the first time for their department, for me. Thank you all for being so great throughout this. Anybody else I should be thanking? The theater department for letting me rehearse in the Barber when there's another show going on. That's really huge. I'm not talking to this side too much. And then finally, thank you to Kazim Ali, who gave us this wonderful work to direct. If I missed anybody, I'm terribly sorry. I love you. But without further ado, please enjoy the show.
Sound of the phone ringing.
Sudden and dark. Sonia
The long sounds
always tries to concentrate on the sunlight.
Sleep.
Edged
Last
window
year,
shadow
Jody drank
as it
tequila for
travels
the very
across the
first
hardwood
time.
floor. She wants to
Imagined a
concentrate
liquid
on it
dessert
so
in her
well
mouth, her
that she could
throat,
see the
her
exact
stomach
moment
parched.
of his
Empty
motion.
sand. Wave after wave of sand, just endless over.
Afternoon is
Stretching
distracting.
away.
Yellow flowers.
Could
on the
years be like that
nightstand
also?
opening. Sonia
Jody
opening
feeds
sometimes,
herself on
feeling
thoughts like
herself
these,
expanding in the
philosophical,
sunlight,
lyrical,
feeling
poetic,
the shadows
thoughts
lengthen
as she engages
across her
the
body,
prosaic tasks of the
sleep
morning
over,
and day.
disappear.
Her cello case is still there, packed in the very back
Still,
of the corner
there is
closet.
no time to see what may happen
Behind
if
skates,
she listens to
kids'
her voice
toys and
or
games, the
returning.
winter coats,
What she will
boxes
hear.
of books.
Each
A
concert she
landscape of
gives
accumulation,
is like an opening
visual
out into
proof
the
of
world.
sedimented years.
herself dangling over the window.
Still,
The sun
Jody
sliding
imagines
through
that
it.
one of these days she
This
might be able
moment.
to play.
Her world of yellow. On the small
Given
table
time
by
in
the
her day,
window,
some
Around
Whisper your
the
breaths
ways,
at the back of
merging
your
space
with
her
brain.
the
mind to
perfection.
practice.
holding
Softly,
up
Practice the way
Rizwan
she
says.
used
dark
to.
red flowers,
An hour a day,
snapdragons,
dedicated to the
in the
time.
other vase, bluebells.
Imagine you can
The
disappear
sound.
Here is the sound, Sonia thinks,
completely
of flowers. And then
into
the flower opens.
But now,
your breath.
and the
the
sun
younger
has
child
been
is
scratching
shadows
out her
of the
noticing,
room.
and
the
the
older
ring
child is in the
is the
other
Yourself.
shadows.
His
playing
voice
video
rolling
games.
over every minute, falling in sheaves from the
It
sky.
seems she can't
a
even
blanket.
remember.
And she realizes in her reverie, The music
What
Rizwan
Syed
walks up and
sounded
down
like in
between
her,
the
an
rows of
echo,
people.
distant
Quiet
sounds
in
or
long,
a
slow
moment
notes. The edge
when
of
the
the
only
sun
sound she could hear was from her bones
swooned
and not her ears.
along the floor.
The sound of the cello in her hands or the sound of her
She
own
sees it
breath.
again.
He's
Utterly
envious
unable
of
to
the stillness.
forget.
He wishes he could feel the same peace that he is somehow able to lead them to through the
The
road
forgotten
of their
younger
breath.
brother
It's
still
part of the
appears
fiction.
luminous and joyous in all the family portraits. But he's a
Yoga
ghost,
is the cessation of the mind's fluctuation.
happy and smiling,
Rizwan
8
reminds
years
himself.
old, dead from
Still,
cancer.
he remembers
Nearly
how
8
it
years.
feels.
Bhishma lies
Breathing.
back on a bed of
Even
arrows.
through the most difficult position, when the body
Down
is
across the
twisted,
string.
Die.
the organs compressed.
to fold
Last
himself
year,
back
when
into
his
the
aunt had
beginning,
sickened,
Jonah
died
cast
quickly
his
of
own
cancer.
spirit
Rizwan
voluntarily
couldn't
out of his
breathe.
body.
The
All the
moment
stories
of
of
suffocation
death
when he
and
heard
its
the
purposes
The surface
fail
of
to
the world
satisfy
trembles.
his
metaphor.
The air
They fail to
resonates.
fill the cup that is broken. All the
Strings
holy
breathing.
songs river themselves
He
into a
remembered
garland
he
of
hadn't
skulls.
seen Auntie for
But
months.
even the garland of
Distant.
1,000 skulls could never
Fall.
approach the actual pain of living.
Rizwan at the
The
funeral.
Sonia
feeling
at
of
every
being
moment
flat
remembers
Having
the
not
sound.
arrived in
life.
time,
Pratap
see her
wishes
body.
he could find an art or
Now,
practice
she
that
wasn't
would
even in his
breathe into his
imagination.
skin, suspend
he
him
couldn't
in
picture her.
existing
Her
How
hands.
his
content to
existence,
his students
past
The
the
music
pain
and
and
laces
years,
tracing the
breathing.
outlines
and
of
the
her
present being
skin.
pulled taut, not
But
existing
here
apart from
it
each
didn't
other,
matter. Here in the
or
class,
preventing each
he
other
could
from
flood
existing,
himself with
She has
breath.
never felt in her life. This
but
is
rather the
Stretched from
present
tips of
and
the
past
fingers
When music
flooding
to
each
fills
other,
her,
toes.
and Pratap floating up to
Draw the
light,
stomach down
balancing
tightly.
on the surface.
she feels
A memory.
lost.
Quiet moments.
His father standing
filled.
with him in the well of
Silence
Hylometer,
open wider.
Remembers
cool
the
and dark
temple
after
pool.
the sweltering day. They
The
stand
temple pool.
silent.
She's adrift
His
now,
father's rough
Watching
and
the
soft
streets
hand on his
halfway
shoulder,
between sleep and the
looking
sound
up at the circle
ocean.
of blue. They are
How
happy
can she
now
open
to
herself to the
decide
sky?
to be with each other in a
Seems
cool
to contain
well,
all things.
to forget all their complicated dramas. Waking from the
remembers
memory of
childhood
being
lesson.
in Egypt with his
The
father,
black stone
suddenly
embedded in the
returned
house
to
of
his
God
present
in
life,
Mecca.
and realizing his
A
younger
focal
brother,
point of the
a
pilgrimage.
sweet
It's a
meteor,
delirium.
hardly through
Sky,
the
now
fever
sort of
sky
fever.
will now never be alive
Touch.
again.
By
The illusion
each
of
delirious
permanence and
pilgrim.
sustenance offered by
His
both
auntie had been
art
on the
and rivers
pilgrimage and
was
revealed
nothing but sufferance.
that it was
There was
Perhaps,
no
but not
suffer,
likely.
No
For
help
possessing
for breath
anything,
for God.
but rather
being
Death was
possessed.
real and awful and final, and Pratap was alone. Pratap
Otherwise,
imagined his
Auntie
breath
had explained,
washing through his body.
it would dissolve.
He imagined the
There would
molecules of his
be
brother's
nothing
skin.
left.
Buried
The
Rizwan
sun
imagined the
dissolving
black
into the
stone was
window.
other
bursting
side of the
itself,
world.
The
lingering
color of
in
the
a
slowly
trees
small,
dissolving
small
into the
kilogram.
sky. Her
Scattering
hands
aside,
catching
wedged
themselves
and
into the
bulging
lower
traces
self.
traces across
The
the
hair of
world,
the
Pratap
carried
felt
by them
himself
home.
washed into and out of his body. He
So
prays
he
there is
scattered
more
their
to it
stories
than
with
just
terrible
that.
scattering.
The body is
Rizwan
versing.
quotes to himself.
He hopes the spirit is more than flesh.
The
That
body
little
of
Half
a
of it
thing
was
is
violin,
a
alive in
pilgrim
some
come
space
warm
of the
and
universe,
see the
and
black
from
in
dust
some
in their
other
home.
mystical
vibrating like a
existence.
living thing along her.
Whether
How
a sun
perfect and
or an
exciting
animal
that
or
it
the
would
trees
take
in the
all
yard,
The
pilgrims
bones
past
of her
and
face.
present and
or his
eternity
music, it doesn't matter. But that
place
he's
the
alive.
stone
Mouth.
back together.
Her eyelids.
Music. Breath.
Sing.
It is 7 in the morning, and the alarm rings for a second time. Jody struggles to rise. It is the day after Thanksgiving, so she has to wait for long minutes at the end of the driveway before the traffic on the main road thins enough for her to be able to pull out. The sky is cold and gray, and she confesses
He's
to
somehow in
herself
love, though, with the
sliding
frozen
into
cloth
traffic.
of grief
she adores this weather. So cold that even the
that
puddles
collects
of mud
itself
on
in
the
his
roadside
heart.
have frozen.
Different
When
from
she
the
walked
sick
to the
feeling
car,
in his stomach
her nostril
when he
hairs
looks at a
froze quickly.
photograph of Vivek.
The pores
When
of
he
the
feels,
skin
he would
of her
collapse
face
if he
and
didn't
hands
focus hard
hardened
on
like
standing
glass
up,
to the point of
where he
shattering.
felt he could easily vomit or die.
The morning drive from home to Roswell Park usually takes 40 minutes. Down Transit
Sometimes when
Road,
he thinks back to
clogged
before
with
his
early
brother's
morning
death,
traffic, nearly
when he was still
unmoving.
sick, little, frail, limp. He could
In the
hardly
morning,
think about his brother's
creeping
illness
past
then.
Walmart,
Couldn't speak
past
or put
Fridays,
sentences
and
together.
Applebee's,
To say to
past the
himself,
mall, the Kinko's,
my little brother is
the
going to
Acura
be gone.
dealership, opaque window
Soon.
shields. each.
My little baby brother will be gone.
Asking her
But
a
this
question.
feeling is different, thinks Pratap.
She didn't know what the
It's
questions were.
Cold
Regal.
feeling collecting like a
Super
snowdrift
cinemas, drive-thrus,
around the sore
coffee
heart.
shops, car wash,
Feels
the
beautiful.
video store, exit ramps,
Ice crystals
Dick's
collecting.
Sporting Goods,
Great ice
Chili's, Red
Secret
Lobster,
caves of
Barnes and
emotions.
Noble.
The quivering pores. And Pratap
And
knows.
suddenly,
It
Jody's
is
thinking
possible
about
to
groceries.
float up on this frozen
All the
lake,
shopping still
be
left
borne
to do.
across it to be able to forget.
She hasn't eaten organic produce in years. She's always reading about the benefits.
Each morning of life is pulled back,
Likewise,
thick
this
curtains,
morning, flipping through the
grainy
speed
and gray
dial
like a film noir that always begins. The
on her
same.
car radio.
It's him,
Top
awkward
20
and
hits,
asking for directions
classic rock,
from all the strangers.
country,
He's
NPR,
alone, as
alternative
usual.
rock,
Always
But they all
acts out
sound
the
the same
same
to
part,
all the
flat,
time,
uninspired, and a
exactly
little
the
bit
same
panicked.
to her.
The
In
same.
the earliest part of the morning,
Sonia
Still,
raises
when
her
he's
hand
quiet,
and looks
this morning
along
she
tries to
reveals
sound like
himself
a
as
swab.
revealed
Why should she
completely.
listen to this?
And
All the way
surrounds
from
himself
the
with
reality
the
of
reality
driving
of
through
all
static
her
and
young
hungry
child.
crowds
of his body's grief.
My
And
breath
his
is
life
the
is
instrument.
grasping
My
at
My
the
body is the
influence of
music.
the
She's advertising.
I am the
string
sound.
dance, she imagines.
He remembers
So
Why is it
how
always
like
her
fish,
stuck in
brothers
front of
and
the day
father,
after
and
Thanksgiving?
feels
Smooth
somehow it is like that
Swimming to
still.
the sun.
And the sound of strings fills the car. The windows thrums along her sternum. Jody sighs. Feels like each rib is opening in the vibration of sound. The sonata fills her. She knows it. It's Rebecca Clark's sonata for viola and piano, odd and unsettling, and it rages across her skin, storms raised on the surface of her life by weather miles above. Her lips are numb. She'd forgotten she could feel like this, could feel the sounds of strings in her fingertips and her lips. She's alone with the music. The rolling of the tires on the wet road is music. The muffled traffic billowing is music. Jody on her way to work the day after Thanksgiving. Sonata in E-flat major. Toccata and fugue in B minor. Symphony in D, opening with the English horn. Jody smiles. Here's my life, she thinks. Gray sky, alone here, wet sky. Here's my life in B minor. The cello is the instrument closest in tone to the human voice. She recalls her high school music teacher saying. It's why she chose the instrument. She remembers having to write down how many minutes a day she played, but she can't remember the sound.
Rizwan walks to the altar at the far side of the now empty room, blowing out the candles. He picks up the black yoga blanket one of the students left behind, folds it carefully. It comforts him to do this. Slowly roll up the mats, stack them back on the orange table, replace all the ashen incense sticks. This was the most distressing part of Auntie's death. When he arrived a week later, weary from being on an overnight bus, he noticed that no one had replaced the flowers in the vase on the kitchen table. Why would anyone have done it? Who will replace the flowers now? He asked the Maulana, his voice breaking. Listen, darling, said the Maulana, tenderly taking Rizwan's hand. You must do it now. And it seemed that this one task would break Rizwan's heart. Later that day, standing in the supermarket amongst daisies and zinnias and ferns and cactus flowers, he couldn't bring himself to take any of them back into the house. He'd chosen the zinnias finally, but when he'd returned, he just sat there on the porch with them. She will always be gone. Before she had died, Rizwan's mother had called him. They hadn't spoken for 4 months. Her voice sounded loose, like an untuned viola. Auntie's been taken to the hospital, she'd told him. She's on oxygen because her lungs won't breathe anymore. Rizwan decided not to make the 18-hour bus trip that weekend. The cancer had run through Auntie quickly. Devoured her, his mother hissed through clenched teeth. 5 weeks later, Rizwan arrived at the bus depot to find he was too late. She was gone.
Jody closes her eyes, tries to imagine she
Rizwan
could
stood
become
there on the
light,
platform,
the
stunned,
glass, that she
thinking
could
irrationally
literally
that he
fly
could
out of
fly
her
back
life,
in
out
time,
of her body.
come earlier, and then his mother embracing him for the first
Disappear.
time in years, saying his
So
name
many of
over
her
and
clients
over
have
softly.
described the feeling of
Rizwan.
alienation to her.
Rizwan. And irrationally, he remembers he's got a secret
Cancer is the
second
body
self.
betraying itself.
When he was young and lonely,
Its
he
own
invented
cells
his twin
mutating
brother.
and devouring the health
But it doesn't
and
matter.
strength of the body.
His imaginary brother
She
who
would
held
tell
his hand,
patients
who
to
even had a
visualize
name.
their chemotherapy
exist.
as a light,
His name was Hassan.
chasing the
remembers
cancer
Rizwan.
through their bodies,
Rizwan doesn't know who will hold his hand,
incinerating the
or
cancer.
if anyone will ever hold his hand.
Metaphor
Comfort
doesn't solve
him,
the
he's
problem,
scared.
she knows.
The problem
A patient
is
showed her a
Rizwan
poem
doesn't
about
know
chemotherapy
anyone
by
in the world who
Lucille
is the
Clifton.
way he is.
A
He's
suicidal
dying.
body
He
hosting a
can't think of a
murderous
human
hero.
way to tell his mother
That's
and
chemo,
father.
she thought. At some
doesn't have
point,
anyone
Jody
in his life.
believes the
Not
soul comes to
family,
understand the
not lover.
body is not the
The
self.
one aunt who accepted him is dead. Rizwan exhales slowly and takes a
body
look
is
around the
only a
yoga
house,
studio. The orange
imperfect,
curtains,
and failing.
images of saints on the altar.
The body is
He
house,
was always taught God is all-seeing,
through which the
all-knowing.
spirit breathes.
He never had a problem reconciling Islamic doctrine with Vedantic and yogic teachings. But now, at the purest moment of crisis, when loneliness is a solid thing in his stomach, Rizwan
It's not really a
is not
reassuring
content
thought,
to believe
Jody
the idea
knows.
that God
To someone
pervades
in
all
mortal
living
pain.
and non-living matter.
That you
But
are
the
not
idea
the
that
self
God
you
is
always
in the
believed
innermost
in,
secret
always
reality of the
secretly loved.
individual soul, a secret self. Suddenly,
If the body is merely a
Rizwan
shell,
realizes with
nothing
deeper
but an
and deeper
instrument to
dread,
be played,
he's not sure if he believes in yoga anymore.
then who is the player?
What good is it if in his inner heart he
controls
doesn't
her?
know what
Who is
God
Jody?
is anymore? There's no one to talk about it with.
Jody knows the truth.
Rizwan's
All the
spiritual
poetry,
teacher's gone to
all the
India.
metaphors, even
He
the
can't
talk
tell any of his students.
about the
And
body.
he certainly can't
turning
talk
into
to the
light.
Maulana about Vedic
When it
philosophy.
is buried in the earth, none of it helps.
Rizwan is alone.
The idea of the self being separate from the body
Worse,
that is
he's
dying
getting used to being alone.
doesn't
All
help the
language
worst
is not
patients.
cadence, realizes Rizwan.
Jody
We
talks
don't
them through
all
death
become
as
luminous.
they slowly crumble.
There is both ugliness
Lose
and
their
weakness in
structure
any
and their
natural
strength.
landscape,
Jody helps
Rizwan
them
thinks. Some of us
open
are the
themselves
weak
up
parts.
to the last
Some of us are
physical
ugly.
experience. Their
Rizwan
pain
looks at himself in the
the
mirror
body
and realizes that accepting this
flies
makes
apart
him
the way a
feel
burning
better.
house crumbles. The body
Parts of us are
opens
unpleasant, rude,
to pain.
and common. We are not all music makers. We are not all speaking instruments. Some of us are silent.
Sun wakes her. As much as anything, the long beams divide her into zones of light. Sun that fills her, slowly and yellow. The bowl of her face, her ears, chest. She
It
touches
feels
her
like he leaves
chest
a little
bone,
slip, a
caught
little
in the
shred of
morning
himself
light,
behind in
her
the
sun
room
heart.
when he leaves in the
Imagine
morning.
there's a sundial
He
in her
doesn't want it
chest,
to be like that.
directing her where
Every
to
single
go
day
in
he
a subtle
wishes
shadow.
he didn't have to work, that he could stay. It shouldn't
Again,
be like this.
She's
He
filled.
wishes he could carry this
As
morning
she was in
feeling with him
sleep with a
throughout the
particular
whole day.
music, a single violin, playing
That
the
his day
fiercest
might
and
not
most
be
piercing
wrinkled and
note,
crumpled
cutting
with
across the
feeling,
ambient
but
noise.
settle into a horizon. Sometimes,
The
though,
orchestra
he was
will
happy
now
to leave his unwrinkled
join
self
each of them
behind
into
him,
key with a
face the
single
day
note.
and be battered. Without that
Of
perfect
course, she
moment,
thinks,
that peaceful
Join the
feeling,
sheets up around her.
they can
It's not
always
always
go
like
back to
that.
the emptiness and hold it.
She puts
After
the
all,
sheets
knows
aside,
Pratap from his teaching,
sheets up from
he's
the
temporary
sky's
the
edge.
way the grasses,
Now,
the trees,
it
the
is time
sky,
to
people.
wake. When
He
Sonia
stops
leaves the
thinking
bed,
that he is
even when
missing
she's in
something.
hotel traveling, she makes
The
it.
young man at the corner, the smoke, the honking car,
She has no
this is all
furniture
there
at all
is.
in her apartment save a
thinking
futon,
about work,
an
emptying
end
himself.
table, a
Pratap
desk,
begins to think emptiness is a form of joy.
a low coffee table, In one room, the floor is covered wall to wall with tatami mats.
Jody arrives at work humming.
The floors in
Soon,
all of the other
he has
rooms
to
are
go to
white
the
planked
office.
hardwood.
He decides
all
to think
polished
of
to
his
shine.
8-hour day as a way of focusing his energies.
She's on the 30th floor. She leaves the window open to the constant winds. The
While
sound
he's
tapestry
working,
of the
a stream of
street
foolish radio songs
washes
blares
through the
over the
rooms,
PA system.
shivering day.
It's not even music anymore.
When it's
He forgets
stormy,
then in
she
the
stands
dull,
in the center of the
regular
room,
rhythms,
lets
forgets
the
his
wind
fickleness,
rush
his
to her.
dissatisfaction, the death of his brother.
After making the bed, Sonia pats the sheets to make sure she's put them taut. She goes to the kitchen, fills the black ceramic kettle with cold water for tea. There is a single bowl on the counter. She bought it from the potter on the street. She eats all her meal from this one bowl and drinks tea from it after each meal. There is a single painting on the wall of the otherwise bare living room. Orange. Just orange with the slightest subtlest modulations. Red, yellow, with some darkening. She had to beg and beg the women who owned the painting to give it to her. Now, she whispers to it, sings to it, plays to it. It's an eye hanging on the wall. So why is it, Sonia wonders, that a painting of a single color can be so captivating?
He's in love
And for now,
with
at
the
least,
illusion of
his life is a
stillness.
pool.
He loves the idea that a painting could be a single
feels like
color,
he's
or
drowning
that
in
a musical
sameness,
composition
in
could be one
smallness,
single,
work,
infinitely held
money,
note.
home,
When one
prepare
instrument lets
dinner,
up,
play a
another
game
picks
with the
up.
kids. Day
Or
after
a
day,
dance that is
see some
single,
friends,
slow
go grocery
movement.
shopping,
I
help
saw
his
a
wife
Japanese
with
Buto
chores,
dance once
do
like
laundry,
that,
weed in the garden.
in which dancers appeared like ghosts,
And
moving
then usually
so slowly
in the
one
evenings,
hardly
watch a
noticed
movie
them at
on
all.
TV.
They
Pratap
crossed the
drives a
stage
nice
vanished,
car,
and
lives in one
Rizwan
of the
couldn't
better
even remember the
condos in
dance.
new development, has a decent job, but still. Pratap
There is no
wonders,
such thing as a
what
staff
might he
balance,
have done
he tells
differently?
students.
It's too late
Balance
now.
is actually
Family, bills to pay, nothing. Can be
a
different
dynamic
from
shifting
Pratap
of
now.
motion on the
He
microscopic
has the
level.
horizontal he's
There
always
is a
wished
constant
for.
correction
He has
that
his
happens
emptiness.
every moment.
But rather
to
than
stay in a
peaceful
balancing
ease,
posture.
the regularity makes
He
him
stops
feel
in
like he's
front
being
of-
choked and can't breathe.
A young
Pratap
man
can't help
trying
but
to
wonder,
balance in
though,
a tree posture.
For all his success
wobbling
and
a little,
certainty, for all the
unsteady.
stability in his life,
When you try as hard as you can to balance completely still, that's
what would it
when
be
you
like to fall?
Rizwan walks down the street in the cool late fall. Orange and red leaves litter the sidewalk, their edges rimmed with frost. He enjoys this feeling, his whole body moving, feeling the muscles meet in his center, where the ribs separate, the energy radiating outwards. The chill in the air only energizes him more. Briskness is the only way to keep warm.
There isn't enough time.
It's cold enough that the surface of his skin tingles with the blood
It will be
warming
cold again,
numbness.
winter, too soon. After
He's
folding
already
the
late
bed,
for
she
his appointment,
stretches
and the
fully,
anxiety of that makes him walk
closing
even
her
faster.
eyes and willing to breathe, to enter the
If he walks
forest
fast
place,
enough, his blood might
fingers
beat in his
and
ears
toes.
like a drum.
the places she
Of all
holds
the
soreness.
musical
If she
instruments,
holds her exhale
Rizwan
long
wishes
enough,
he
she
were a
can hear her
woodwind,
breathing,
allowing sound to move
strong.
through him, rather
her
than a string
breath
instrument
settling to
tuned to
even
dynamic
line.
tension, or
She
a drum
focuses
which
her
is
eye
beat.
on the dust motes,
Everyone
sparkling in
around
the
him is
shafts of
walking quickly
sunlight,
and
which are
firmly.
now thickly
There's something about
spreading
it,
the
though,
room.
that's pleasant.
She folds her
Part of
feet
him
underneath
that
her,
actually wants to be
adjusts the
cold,
hard
so that when he
round
arrives
cushion,
at his
strengthens her spine.
destination, there will be something,
rest back.
cider, herbal tea, coffee, or hot
of her
chocolate
breath.
to warm him.
After
He
Pratap
waits
takes
at the
his
corner
coat
for the light
and
to
gloves
change,
off, and
clenching his
turns
ungloved
the
hands.
computer on,
Frost
he goes to get his morning coffee.
the
Rupa,
road surface,
one of the other
dusted
workers
white,
in the MIS
feels
department
his skin
is
freezing
explaining
in
to
the
him
beautiful
where the
cold
Indian
air.
grocery is.
He
And they
crosses
have
the
all the
street and
latest
walks
films
toward
there,
the massive
even
big
the
building
ones
that
that are
fills
still
the
in the
city block.
theaters. Don't ask how. They all
He knows
laugh.
the way, has planned to come
Pratap
all
is
the way.
carefully writing the
There's
directions
always a
down on the
reason
paper
not to
towel
come.
from the office kitchen. He really
Why should I
misses the
leave
old
the
smells
cold
of his
morning
mother's
and
house.
go back to
All the
old
spices,
death?
the crispy
Rizwan
Indian
asks
snacks,
himself.
rose water, For
The
desserts,
hospital's oddly quiet.
Pratap smiles but
Rizwan
knows his
sees the
life is
hospital
now like
the
a
way
room
seen
without
in
any
TV and
walls.
movies.
These treats and trays he grew
Ask
up
the
with
guard
are
for
absent
directions
in
to
his
the
home.
ward, but
Neither
doesn't
he nor
pay
his
attention
wife
to the
make the
answer.
effort to practice Indian customs. He
Got
hasn't
the
seen
right
an
floor,
Indian film in years.
I was lost for
He
a
heads
while,
back to
walking
his
in
cubicle
circles
and
in a
carefully
ward.
copies out the directions.
It's a brief feeling, but real. He wonders what he's doing here, why he's come. Then,
His
sitting in the
favorite
correct
movie
office at
actress
last,
of all
waiting,
is Jaya
he
Bachchan.
notices a
Why?
photo
He
taped
can't
to the
really
filing
say.
cabinet.
Probably it is because when he looks at
Four
her,
women,
he
sitting,
knows she is thinking
standing
about
together
something.
on a patch of lawn
Her mouth
beside
is
a
always
suburban
closed.
home.
She's always distracted. She
Beyond
never
them,
speaks.
stripe of cement
But there are
driveways
dozens
in
of
the road.
things she is thinking.
3 of them are white women.
Pratap always finds himself at parties in the
With
corner
immense hairdos
with nothing
and
to
short
say,
dresses.
holding his
The
drink,
washed out color
next
tells
to
him
all the
it's
other
the
men who have
70s.
nothing to say.
The fourth
Pratap
woman
misses
with
his
them
mother the
amazes
most.
Rizwan.
He
In the
always
70s,
had something to
in the
say to her.
suburbs, her arms,
He was never silent with her.
linked
But he hasn't
with the
seen her
proud
in
white
nearly
women,
3 years.
slightly apart.
But he
looking
cannot, in
awkward,
English,
but
say
happy.
even half the things he wants to say.
It's a
When
slender
Pratap left
Indian
India,
woman,
his
very
mother's
light
last
skin,
words to
in an
him
orange
were,
sari,
"Be brave."
hair in a bun.
He wanted to, but he didn't know what she meant.
Others are amazed. to
Brave
be there.
how?
She
What
looks
does she
into the
mean?
camera.
He left
puzzled
the
to
house
find
an hour
herself.
early each morning to have time to himself.
Here. Where?
Time to quiet all the noises and
Slip the
figure
photo
where
out.
his life
Flipped
was.
it. Barstow,
More than that,
California,
he wanted to feel
1964.
Anything.
The fourth woman either
Strangeness,
doesn't notice,
violence,
doesn't accept her
distress.
obvious
They all
outside
heave through
status.
him and
She seems
Imagines
small
himself as a
compared to the
choppy
others.
ocean roiling.
Also younger,
Breathing deeply,
18,
he
19.
feels the swelling
20.
waves slacken. Be calm.
Calm.
Looking at her, Rizwan finds himself wishing
She
he had
focused her
taken the
gaze
time
now on
to
the
learn Urdu,
painting.
had practiced his cultural traditions,
Her world was
hadn't
orange.
disappointed his parents. He hadn't even had the courage to go home, even when he knew that Auntie was dying.
As she breathed,
He had been
she
afraid
could feel the
of the
warmth
actual
of the sun on
conversation
her
with his
face.
mother and father.
Warm
So he
breath.
never saw the end. Never saw Auntie sicken, disappear,
Her skin.
then die.
Lotus flower.
Actually, you're lucky, his cousin Delia told him. You didn't have to see how it ended. Some days, Rizwan couldn't even remember Auntie's face, her voice.
Her ocean was breath.
Last conversations with his mother had been too painful for both of them. He'd gone home the week after Auntie died for the funeral.
World was breath.
No one blamed him
She
for not
closed her
coming
eyes.
earlier, but he knew. He should have been there earlier. He should have come. His mother's difficulty in speaking to him told him that. At some point, in the months following Auntie's death, he and his mother stopped speaking entirely. It was odd the way
She felt his sun leaving her skin then, leaving a
weeks
flush.
went by, then months, thinking he would talk to her
March.
if she called, then seasons. Changed, and the year turned. Soon it seemed easier to let the silence between them speak.
Sonia
Pratap sipped
thought
his
of the
coffee,
story he'd been
picked up the
told by
paper.
Uncle
He
Roche.
removed the front
her
section and
meditation
turned to the
teacher.
local news. It was
Roche's
nice to
voice
sit like
came back
this,
to her
first thing
late
in the morning,
afternoon, the
before
Zendo
beginning
floating
any
on
work,
traffic.
just sipping the coffee. Pretty bitter, badly made, sweetened with NutraSweet and vanilla soy milk from the office fridge. Looking at the ordinary news, a collision at an intersection near his home, the county fair, town board elections.
An old gardener
looked
had been
quickly into her
waited his
pocket
whole
mirror.
life to visit
Over
very
the
famous
last
garden.
couple of weeks,
The garden was
she was suddenly
reported to be
noticing that
full
she
of
had
the
developed
world's
lines
most
in her
rare
face.
and exotic flowers. People
We did
came
not
from
grow old
hundreds of
slowly,
miles
Jody
just to
thinks, touching
talk
her
in the
face.
lanes of the garden.
one day,
The gardener
you
had
wake
been
up and
wanting to
suddenly
take this
realize
trip
this
for
whole time
years,
you had been
but had
aging,
never been able to take the time
that
to
you had
undertake
already
the
lost
journey.
something, couldn't go back to feel it go.
Planning for his whole life.
Silver threads woven all through her hair and she was worn. Her mother was nearly all gray at 40. In her 20s and early 30s, her friends were shocked when she revealed her age. But now she looked her age. If
Alas,
history doesn't
old
take
and
us,
no longer needed
Jody
the garden
thought
to
to
work
herself,
in, the man
turning from
departed
the
for the
mirror.
gardens. He walked through
then
the
future
mountain
turned
paths
slow.
and down into the valley and up into the
Who
hills
was the woman
to
in
the
photograph?
high iron gate
Rizwan
of the
wants to
garden.
know.
What does she
His
spend her
heart
life
bloomed.
doing? The days filled, pulled taut, woven into a rough rope.
She's
She
just
great
imagined herself
anticipation.
pulling herself
The gardener
through
went through the
time
gates
and
into the
over
courtyard.
so strange and uprooted.
Just on a whim, he flips past the
Suddenly he
science
stopped,
section, the
horrified.
editorials, the
The courtyard was
cartoons,
completely
to the art
bare,
section.
shorn. All
There's
the
some
bushes and
museums
flower
so
beds and
calculated
climbing
by
lines were
science
cut down
fiction.
raised.
Church
Favorite
organist.
auntie.
It
Art
was
is
something
just after her
incredible.
arrival.
All the roofs torn off,
Understand.
all the flowers
Neurologist
cut.
on music's effect on brain activity.
She leaves the conference room to
Why
go back
not
to
do
her
something out
office.
of the ordinary? Why not have a completely new experience?
He
How
approached the
possible
reception hall
to
trembling,
to see
worrying
someone
about what had
She
happened.
notices his face.
He is ready for an adventure.
An
But
old
with
monk
what
was
time
seems
is
to
it?
smiling
He's
and
older.
saluting
He's
the
small.
He's
gardener.
buttoned
Looks
up to
sad,
the
Come,
sitting
he
there.
gestures. What have you
He's
done?
looking right
cried
at
the
the
gardener
gardener.
in shock and
He's
horror.
He's still lost.
Why have you cut all the flowers?
Still, it's a
The old
day.
monk will
How
only
is it
smile
possible
Wait,
and gestures
She
She thinks that she knows
that
what
we
he is
always
thinking.
forget about death?
We have prepared for
That
your
she looks so
arrival.
comfortable in her
Oh,
wild
says.
sorry
So
with her
plain.
Leading the
plainness.
gardener
So
is.
quiet, the same. He
We want you
stands
to
in
be
the
able
mountains
to
doesn't
for
truly
even
art
notice
appreciate
events,
the
strange
and then
beauty and
notices
spirit
a
of your
particular
garden.
concert in New York City. He would
The
have to
hall
leave work
completely
early to
empty.
catch a train.
Half
to
shadow
Snaking
before
What
a single
might you
table in the
worship?
center. On the
A
table,
special
stands up
single-night
some
only
servants,
engagement by
and
the
a
first
vase,
violinist of the
holding a
Toronto
She
single
approaches
Orchestra.
perfect orchid.
I'm Jody, she says.
Sonia
My
Chang.
name is Rizwan.
Beneath
Our
the
lives
amazing
are like
picture
that
photograph,
photograph.
She feels like someone is looking at
related
her.
to Jody.
she's breathtaking.
There are single
silence
of
flowers
looking,
cut,
Pratap
The
understands
blooms.
music.
then wilts.
It's my mother, Jody tells him.
At some point in the very scene between Noon and Sonia, a bell rings. Sonia slowly closes and opens her eyes, the movement not even blinking yet. A sensation of blue along her fingers warms as she sweetly comes back. Small muscle by muscle, she returns awareness to her breath and body, and realizes how powerful she had been moving this whole time. The sun slides constantly across the field of vision, and the sprout of garlic cloth climbed the 3 green inches in one night. She too has hovered one herself, still. A flower. There is a moment when she takes her violin bow, touches it to the strings, a moment when anything could happen, any music in silence could burst into physical existence, a million possible progressions from the first note. Or just silence.
On his lunch break, Pratap drives over to the record store in the shopping mall. He feels so awkward in front of the young worker, also Indian. He must be the same age as Pratap, but he's wearing a t-shirt and old jeans, has cut his hair very short, is unshaven. Pratap wears his dress pants and feels he can hardly move. The young man asks him if he needs help. Pratap is impatient to say yes, but doesn't want to explain that he saw an ad in the paper, so wanders into the store without answering. He feels hot in his winter coat, doesn't like his cheap haircut, wearing sneakers with his dress pants. Fabi, his niece has said about him, as in, fresh off the boat. Not, as he had originally thought, a term of endearment. He stopped then, and saw his face reflected in a mirror.
There is a support group for families that meets Tuesday nights, Jody told the young man sitting with her. After talking for only 2 minutes, he had crumbled into himself suddenly and wept. face glistened, wilted.
My auntie, he said, trying to even his breathing, is dead. There was a pressure on his throat. She's dead. She was my mother's sister. She was the same as my mother. What he couldn't say.
He was
but
pulling
knew deep
himself
in
back into
that if
himself
Auntie
right
was
in front
alive,
of her.
she would have not allowed the silent ocean
How does
to
one learn
engulf
to
them.
do that?
She would have
Jody
forced he and
wonders
his
to
mother
herself.
to speak again.
How does one actually pull oneself together? Keep secrets again? Live?
They could have all been happy then, he thought. as
She
he
knew he needed to
wept
protect
in
himself,
front
and
of
she
this
let him
woman,
do it.
a stranger.
How often she had done the same thing and done it better. Denied totally anything was wrong, just so she could stand up, walk, continue her life. Every time she got angry or tired or wished she'd made different choices, she felt sick to her stomach as if she was dropping beneath her pain, and the grief would
It
freeze
didn't matter
her
that he was
solid.
weeping in front of her, he thought, wiping his face.
The young man had carefully schooled his face.
She was touched by strangeness also. He could read it in her body, the awkward way she moved.
Was now rubbing his face into composure, rearranging his shirt.
There was something in her plainness, something in her that had never flowered, that he found unspeakably moving. She quivered, as if she were a song about to burst.
After he finally left, Jody breathed out. What, a sigh of relief? What about him had disconcerted her so much? That he was looking at the photograph of her mother, or that he, so small, but strong-looking, so quiet, but self-possessed, and beautiful, a small, pursed mouth, lovely wide eyes, had cried so easily, broken down into sobs so quickly. For a moment, she feared he would become hysterical. But just as quickly, he had composed himself and was able to talk to her once again, calmly. The
He
way
didn't want
he
to talk
looked
to
at
anyone.
her, what had he
He
thought
just
of
wanted
her?
to find what
she
he was
wondered.
looking for. He walked to
I'm
the back
Jody,
of the store,
she had said to
conscious
him,
of
but
the
strictly
workers
speaking,
watching
it wasn't
him,
true.
out of place and discomfited. Pratap
She looked at
scans
the
the
picture of
names
her
of the
mother,
artists,
lonely and
printed on plastic
transplanted.
cards separating rows and rows of CD cases. Pratap
Jody
finds the
closes
disc,
her eyes and imagined
scans
her
it in the
mother's voice
electronic
saying
player,
her name.
closes his eyes, and listens to the music.
Jyoti. Come here, Betty. My Jyoti. Jyoti. Jyoti.
That was the moment that Sonia adored.
Her name?
The moment when the concert hall, filled with people, held their breath. Her arm
Spoken in a
poised,
voice that could pronounce
the bowl
first
resting against the
half
strings,
syllable
but
fluidly.
of course not resting. Held their
He's
breath.
It
He
rings
was shocked.
through her like a
He
bell.
walks quickly
Brings
down
her
the
back
music
across
covers
the
over
years,
him.
street.
home.
He
breathing
prepares.
deeply, remembering.
It is possible
To be pierced,
And listened.
to not feel this flattened sorrow.
he's speechless.
Possible to hear music. Jyoti.
He has never heard anything like this before.
Brought back to your
He
life,
imagines the music
breath
like a river.
by breath.
The sound
Rizwan
runs
pulled
into
his
his
class
ears
up.
and drops down, pooling in his stomach.
But
Last
brought
year,
back to what?
after complaining too often
where?
about his back, his
Brought
wife
back
had
means
convinced
you've
him
been
to go visit
somewhere.
a chiropractor. The
Brought
doctor
back to this,
explained
thanks,
to him
Rizwan,
nearly poetically
walking down
how the
street,
body
cold.
holds on to all its old traumas, its fears,
This,
and clenches
thinks,
them close to the
looking
spine,
at his own
will not
hand,
release them.
the routes that emerged in his palm.
So the
This is
doctor
the
had
book that
placed his
fortunes are
hands
read
on
in.
Pratap's neck,
Here, he
his
thinks,
back, all the most
touching
vulnerable
an
places,
intersection.
coaxing
Once,
him to
a
relax,
fortune teller at a
to
carnival
surrender all
told
the
him
old
he was a
pain to his
keeper of
future
secret
wellness
powers.
all along his spine. His
Keeper
old
of
grievances
secrets is more
lived,
like it,
leaving
he
India,
thought.
coming along to
Each
America,
place in
living
your palm,
alone for
she had
years
told him.
before meeting his wife.
That
Suddenly,
two
Pratap
lines
panicked,
intersect
knowing that the
is the
doctor, by
location of
physical
psychic
invention, was about to
abilities.
pull free the
Rizwan
old
arrives
hurts,
home. He continues to breathe
release
deeply
them into the
and
spaces
evenly
of his body,
as he puts
the
his
air
jacket
and the
on.
light, and suddenly he
It's a
thought,
nice idea
this wasn't right.
that his hand
This
held
wasn't the
secrets
way
from him.
he
and
wanted to
fate
free
was written
himself
by
from
use
pain.
directly into the body.
That
What he
his
had always
secret
thought of
fears,
his forms
his plainness,
of
his
ugliness
ugliness,
and
his
coarseness
ordinariness
were
ought
powers.
not to be straightened away. He
He
stumbled
sits down
upon
on
the
the edge of
table,
the chair, completely
apologizing
still.
to the surprised doctor, suddenly afraid to be well this way.
This
He
practice
wanted
is
instead to
different
win
from
the
yoga,
battle
in which
somehow,
the breath
with a kind
is
of
supposed to
intentional
rush
action.
through one. To
That was the
cleanse.
thing that had brought him to
Instead
yoga.
here, he
The
aims to feel
doctor,
his
soothing
rib
his agitated
his heart,
patient,
floating up
had
over the
given
pelvis.
a
Anatomically
brochure for yoga
supported,
classes
you know,
just
by
down the
only
street
4
from the
vertebrae,
office.
reaching
So
up
each morning,
a
the top
tender
went.
stalk.
He's there now.
Imagine a light in
His
your
ears
blood and
filled
body,
with
the
music.
doctor told
In
him,
his memory,
burning away the
transported to the
cancer.
place of floating.
It will
There in the
help you
music
to
store, he
visualize.
stretched his
Just
arms up
vigorous
overhead,
positive thinking
feeling
can
his
help to
ribs
heal you.
expand, ignoring the strange looks.
Rizwan
The shop
closed
workers
his
were
eyes
giving
and
him.
imagined prana
He feels himself
rushing
open
through his
physically.
body in the
What if
form
he
of
hadn't
light.
panicked? What if he had
There's
let the
not
doctor
really
yank his
such a
spine
thing
into
as
alignment?
prana, he thinks.
Would he feel
himself,
even better
believing.
now?
And
Pools
thinking
of
is not
music.
going to heal him. Just as Auntie never got better, all our prayers did not save her. All our good feelings didn't save her. She withered. And then she died.
Flood the
Rizwan
cavities
stood up
of
in
his
front of
body
class
and
every
carry him
morning
up.
to say,
He's a
breath
boat that
will
is
bring
from
you
a
back,
is being carried out,
bring
past
you
all
back to
ports,
life,
to open water.
bring you back to breath.
When he is in that
There's
class,
nowhere to
the
come
cop
back
remembers.
from, Rizwan
It is the sound of his teacher's
I am
voice.
still dying,
That is the boy.
he thinks.
The soothing
Breath is
thing
not
that
a
guides
cushion.
his journey.
Isn't a
away
place to
from the
rest
shore
back?
and
Isn't a
which guides him
home
back.
to shelter or save you?
And he
The
can lose
thread,
himself there.
The thread that
Lose
sews
himself
the body
also
to its
in
life,
immense,
spun
immense
along 4
breath.
small vertebrae. A
There
thread
was no
that
answer.
so easily can break.
The long threads back to his mother, to India, to his loneliness, his breath. Could he ever
Rizwan suddenly
release such
realized that
hurts?
he's been holding his
Release
breath.
them into his body?
Lets it go. Then,
Why the panic?
with
why
a
not go to the
long,
concert?
even exhale. So there he was, sitting in the kitchen of his apartment, breathing,
Sonia Chang's
counting his
arm,
breath, trying
moving
not
through
to think
time,
about Auntie,
releasing
about
him
the social worker at the
from the
hospital, or
emptiness
the class
of
he
the
had taught
sound
that
of
morning.
breath.
People of all ages and bodies, their
whose
tragedies
breath
and
Pratap wonders,
ordinarinesses,
exhaling
all the
strongly,
places in their
the
bodies
sounds of
that
the
their
violin
breath
seeking his
stops.
bones. That morning, he tried to
He
carry
sees the
himself
young
on his
man,
own by breathing
young,
deeper
but
into
stiff,
an intense posture,
trying to move
into the compressed
a twist.
place. The music
Inhaling
he's
to
listening
lengthen
to
his
is
spine,
rushing into an
and
empty
then
space in
expelling
him
air to
that
try
he
to
never
create
even
more
knew
space.
about. He feels
He
his
cannot
bones
manage it.
opening wider.
Rizwan
His
puts
chest
his hands on
expanding.
the man's shoulders.
He feels like he has a
Matches
very long
his
road
breath.
to walk on.
And then
Top sighs
they
and
exhale
pleasure
together.
of breath.
twists him deeper.
His
Good,
shoulders
Pratap,
are opening like
he says
wings.
soothingly.
When did I stop listening to her? Jody asked herself, how did I become so afraid? Jody looks at herself in the mirror. She has always allowed herself to be mistaken for Italian, Mexican, Eastern European, anything. Always believed to herself the false pronunciation of her was real. Jody wasn't Jyoti. Jody sounded easy in the air and ear. So much less to explain. After she finishes her morning work, she stops in a cafe on the way home to have some time for herself before picking up her children from school. She sits facing the window, drinking coffee, looking at the icicles dripping from the cafe's roof. The thaw and the freeze combine in some way she doesn't understand, to make the water weep solid from the eaves.
She composes
She
herself.
composes. The
Smooths
paper
her
has a story
hair,
confirmed,
lies her
what
cheek
she
along the
always knew to be
violin,
true.
prepares to open herself.
The universe sings.
She feels
The perennial
timeless
note of a
as she
distant
draws her
black
arm
hole
back.
has been identified
This moment touches
by
the
astronomers
horse
as
hair
a
of the
perfect
string.
and constant B flat.
Pure silence, pure music. The universe
Precisely
could follow the
67
moment of ball
octaves
resting
below
on the
middle
string.
C.
It sings.
Wind combined with the freeze and thaw this morning, the icicles curved to the side, following the equation of freezing versus the wind.
There is a cloud in this page Sonia read once in a book. If you were a poet, you could read it. When she plays, the vibration of the string is physical. Thrums in the air, in her hands, along her skin, the body of the violin warms itself. She could breathe in sound. Is there truly a cloud in the page? She wonders. She doesn't see it, can't feel it. Music is a girded construction, but the cloud, she doesn't understand. But she believes is there a cloud here. Sonia feels her
Looking out the
collarbone
window
against the
across
wooden
Main Street,
underbelly of the
winter air
violin.
thick.
Music
The
is
top edges
attention,
of the
Sonia
houses
knows.
cutting into the sky solid
Her
fabric.
eyes carefully on the score she practices. We could
She
breathe
believes in
properly
optical
too,
illusions can
if we
have an
paid attention.
actuality. The blue really cut.
She's
Spilling
carrying
down
to the
on the
man and
rooftops, the
Crouse
icicles
of
hanging
notes
crazily
and
from the
time
corners.
signatures, dynamic marks. Carry from the
How
winters,
walks
the
out into
frigidity,
the street,
Rizwan is left
looser, happier, excited that he's made his decision.
into her mind. Along
He
stone
imagines
wall
what it
streets,
would be like
to build a yellow
himself
white
in the structure
school
of
open
Quartet,
space.
making unified music.
Rare
Perhaps
But she
branch.
knows that
played
thought
neither
meant
the
as
first
Sharp
food
winds
nor the
and
second
twists
melody,
of her
nor the
life.
harmony. Instead,
Where would she
that
place
is
the
the
music?
Rotella
Cars
itself,
tuning
Digs
everything
into
to
the
a touch
blue.
control.
slow,
Pray.
spare, sweet.
Hey folks, not the end of the show. Just a 15 intermission right now. Sorry I didn't make that clear earlier. My bad. So feel free to go to the bathroom out there. Yeah, clap, duck out if you have to. Thank you.
charges to be class. He was talking as if you were
Hey folks. Thank you. We're about to resume our staged reading. Thank you for staying. Very much appreciate that. Just wanted to announce that there will be books for sale after, over there outside the atrium, and there will also be a Q&A / talkback / just discussion with myself, Kazem, the writer, and the actors, because I'm sure you have a lot of questions. Without further ado, please enjoy the rest of the show.
Pratap watches the river rush away to his left as the train travels south. Perhaps all matter is flying apart, he thinks, confused in the late afternoon sun, mixing up memories from a physics class in college and his yoga class that morning. Morning. Like grief falling, the trees are bare, his head is bare, his face feels so cold. It doesn't matter, Pratap thinks, taking a sip of a thin coffee he bought. What matters is how exciting it is to feel lost, to feel that my skin doesn't hold my spirit in after all, that I am drifting, slowly, over eons, apart. There's my answer to what's the nature of the universe. He closes his eyes and lies back on sound, the hum of the train, the earth's vibrations against the rails, the long yellow sound, the bed of sound. He hears Rizwan's voice, wants to talk to him, tell him about his little brother, tell him about all the things he has forgotten, tell him that he believes music doesn't make you forget. It makes you remember.
Jody picks the kids up from kindergarten and preschool and heads off to the science museum. There are no good parking spaces left. She double checks Vipul's scarf and Jaya's zipper before getting out of the car and opening the doors. Hold Mama's hand the whole time, she tells Jaya as Vipul runs ahead. Jaya has the most questions. About snakeskins, stars, the stuffed buffaloes, where earthquakes come from. Vipul's attention is like fire, racing from case to case, exhibit to exhibit. Jody smiles. He is like her. While Jaya takes after her father, a dark, still pool.
The apartment's gotten colder. That's the price of many windows. Rizwan fills a jug with water and walks through, watering plants. The jade, a croton he believes is dead, a ficus he managed somehow to save. 3 dark plants whose name he doesn't know. Their leaves cascade over the bookshelf, covering the books in green. It's been a while since I've read, he thinks, taking a book down. How about a book written as music? Or one in which no one knows the ending because no one cares. A book told as wind in snatches of overheard conversations, just whispers in the day or licks of flame. How about a book that never finishes, just drifts off into silence?
People's eyes light up with joy. The pendulum, suspended from the ceiling, slowly swinging, to show over the course of hours and hours the pure fact of the Earth's actual rotation. Jody can't wrap her head around how, but doesn't care. She's just as transfixed, thinking to herself how slowly things happen. You never know they're happening. Then one day, years later, you look up, everything's gone. She and her husband grown apart, and there's no way to fix it. Her eyes follow the pendulum as if hypnotized. Vipul is pressing the button to call the elevator, and Jaya, still holding her hand, is looking wistfully into a room filled with rows and rows of geodes. Not no way to fix it because they don't want to, and because they don't even talk to each other anymore. They don't include each other in their most personal hurts, and all their distance has been years in the making. They can't fix it because they don't even notice there's anything wrong. Bleak sky. The top of the snow drifts frozen into ice. Jody walking with Jaya and Vipul into a room ablaze with fantastic crystal formations, molecules achieving unbelievable symmetry. Further proof, thinks Jody, of design. Further proof that things do fall into place. Even the earth has its harmony. Though, what significance this carries for her own life, she doesn't know.
He doesn't know why he's going. As the river rushes by, surface more and more golden in the afternoon sun, he thinks, what if I don't go back? And the sickening joy plunges into him. Slowly, he faces the alarming idea that he is ready now to fall. This is the best part, he thinks, sitting up straight on the seat, his skin sparking with goosebumps. It isn't like music where there are formulas and progressions, mathematical concordances that play themselves out. Suddenly, he feels seasick, realizes there's not plot for what happens next. Finally, at a point in the music where any note can be played. He wants this. Closes his eyes, opens his hands. He wants to listen.
There's a small storage space in the back of his apartment, filled with boxes of books and all of his old paintings. He doesn't paint anymore. He's run out of ideas, skill, doesn't have the time anymore, the space to do it, or the money for supplies and paint. Jody was trying to tell him about therapies involving painting, art making, even yoga. None of his paintings ever looked like anything, all nearly one color, but with shadows, little stories Rizwan would write into them. They are windows, he thinks, looking at his favorite. A blue window, open into sunlight. They are storms. They drink from the room.
The train arrives at Grand Central. Pratap imagines the slow deceleration as a long, long exhale. He loves to breathe.
Jody buys the kids pizza at the concession stand. Gives Jaya little sips of punch while looking at pictures of whales with Vipul in the back of the book she bought him. Tries to think poetically for a bit about which emblem she would choose as a metaphor for her life. Slowly unrolling, is she the brilliant crystal heart concealed with the rough boulder? Or the pendulum, swinging so slowly, that even the utter rotation of the earth is barely noticed?
Heartbroken somehow, unclear somehow, the wind sings a note through the glass. Being told once, glass is liquid. Only when cold and cold and cold will it turn solid and then shatter. Sonia shudders, remembering dreams, a being hovering over the bed, black wings, black hair threading from the corners of the room, the dark circle of the unseen moon, seen even against the night. Seen, dark, is darker than dark. She hasn't anything, she thinks, in the darkening room, which she plays. The box thrum in her hand. She feels like she's drinking from silence. Feels like her body is a crack in the universe. When she drinks from the music filling the box, what is it that is drinking from her? Ghost
Pratap
sky
allows himself
liminal.
to be carried along.
For a couple hours
painting
each
allows
day, a
me
neighbor
to see
watches
a
the
ghost.
kids.
As
The
if she's
stream
swimming
rising
in
into
current
cold
Jody
air.
has the luxury of
Thinks
the late
Rizwan, touching
afternoon,
the surface's texture.
This way, he can't relate
sitting
to
in
his
the
fears
kitchen,
of
drinking
being in
coffee,
New York City.
wishing her husband
The
was
streets
home.
thratter
do
in
this?
thousands unset ways.
He
This
imagines
is a
the
dream
boundaries
that
She would have
ends
between
in
something to
the
say.
skin, the
I
air,
could never do this.
the other
now.
people around him dissolving. And
Something
pretends that everyone
beyond,
is the
"This
same
is what I
body
did
moving.
today."
Giftless.
He
What
saw
did
it in
you do
biology
today?
class.
For the last time,
cells
she
rushing
saw the
about.
horizon from an
Above
airplane.
them, spattered
Tens of
fragments
thousands
Which
of
is
feet
always
above the
this
ground.
Or this, still even.
As if he were ever gifted. Seeing
Nothing
ghosts, he
would be
thinks,
something.
means letting
Pasted
go.
to the sky
are
by
the
generosity and
constellations of the
disbelief.
zodiac
Suspended
Opening his
against
hand and letting
logic
it
and her
fly
fear.
out.
looming on the blue dome.
Her fear
Top
leads
cranes
her
his
to
neck up to
understand.
see.
Missed call
Disconcerted since her
blinking on
talk
his
with the
phone.
patient about
What I
He's
understand
Virgo.
her
now,
mother.
Sees
The
an
Virgin.
incoming
She's
call
lost
on
her
his
body
phone.
is
between the
space.
afternoon and the space,
turning here.
between Jody
Now
and
he
More
feels
Jody.
alone.
as
Wishing
the earth
she knew what to
changes
call
Pinching his
herself.
sore body. Wishing
Jyoti
could
sounds
say what he
strange
wanted to
even in
say.
her own
Below
mouth
days
now.
were unfolding, but here,
on the other
From
hand,
behind
Sonia is
somewhere,
why
she
he's
catches
So
the
long it
grab
has
of a
been
voice
since the secretly
swallowed.
speaking in the
interjected
accent.
first vowel.
In
Sonia
spite of
sweats.
himself, he turns in the direction.
Jyoti.
Sonia
of
in
the speaker.
dreams.
She says
who
out
can
loud.
misunderstand orange, or a circle, or a tree?
There are
In
two
paintings,
men
Slowly
standing a couple of
practicing
feet
the
away,
sound
only
of it,
symbol.
how it
talking
feels
about
So
strange
delicately
things.
from her life vacant,
Their
carries
voices
the
Whatever
vessel
secret
of
of
a
their hearts
violin.
is
the
true.
reflections of them.
She's in her
His ears
30s,
haven't
she
heard
can't
this in
use
so
it.
long.
From second
Top
to
Everyone
right.
who knows
second.
her,
Recognizing
everyone
the
in
sounds
Here is
of
the
himself.
pure
calls her
near
Jody,
minute.
Listening joyfully
even her husband,
to the
even
way words
herself.
sound.
You have to
In
tell
her
it
own
seamlessly.
mind.
She's caught in. The years
For a
of
month after
listening and
Anton
not
found it
listening.
strange,
Jody reaches over to turn on the radio.
The way
Had
sound
tried
There's
to
always
write
races
his
static.
away
feelings
from
into
her.
She has
story.
never tried to tune a station to this radio.
How far
He looks
away
at
is
his
she
watch,
from
right?
the
He knows
internet?
he
could
has
only
to
write
hurry.
music at home.
He looks for
Turns
time.
the
main
dials of the
character,
stations,
using a
grimacing
moth.
at the
What was
sameness.
listening to her music? Once
Last
enticing,
night,
shuttling
alone,
back and
Dream
going to
forth
a
an
concert on
awful
his own.
pop song.
He couldn't bring himself to go back in time.
between the
There
public
was
There was
high
no
over
one
and
who
over
would
again,
adapt
even
no
her
one
dreams
interested in this
corrupted.
kind of music.
a weekend.
Day
The
after
worst
day
Now
part
at
was
his
that to
office,
her,
Pratap's
she's
so
so rigorous
rigorous
and
his
paced
body was
the
changing.
rhythm was.
wondering
The
what he
spirit,
would
the
have
attention,
his
was
life
her
brilliance,
brilliance,
the jealousy,
toned
was
down.
how the rest of it would be.
The
And then he
success
wonders
was
why
pulling
he was
towards
feeling
rather
that
him.
he had
be
missed
seized.
something.
He presses
Skewered
the
by
button on the
sound.
machine.
When
As a
he had done
child,
everything,
she
that
had
he
spent
ever
up for
wanted,
hours
Static.
alone in her
Comes out of
bedroom.
him, tired, alarmed. Rizwan.
had never
Pretend
felt
how the
lost,
minutes it was a
never
secret
felt left
order.
behind.
We have
yet.
been trying and trying to reach you.
That no one
Always
else
at the
in
slight
end
the
of
house
shift of
knew
sound.
about.
Daddy has
Couldn't
had a
wait to
heart
go home.
attack. Please call us right away.
They would
Couldn't
go
wait to
about
Static
their
to
say
tasks.
static with a thinnish stripe of sound.
This one
between.
can't think. The blue painting is right in front of him.
Your
What's
homework,
the
Crystal,
hour
the
ago?
quiet,
household
buried
It
in
will
an
take him
ocean of
3.5
white noise.
hours to get home, driving at
Come
top
clear, she
speed.
coaxes the
One day in his
And
field
suddenly
class,
from the
Rizwan
walls
had read to
roll
the
up.
group a poem. Pratap couldn't remember all of it, but he
Strange
could remember
when you
things
emerging
like
from
birds
nowhere.
quietest
to not
motions.
take up space.
Ghostly
Strange
Her
sounds.
fingers
As he
twitching
grabs
on
the
that,
keys
a
and
little more
more,
to the
he's thinking
side.
of himself.
No
They
one knows
reveal
Strings
it.
who
of
is
notes
playing.
now thrashing up.
Thinking about Auntie at the end of her life.
No one
Thinking
Like
of
a
minds
fish
the
it.
swimming
radiation,
deep in
not
the
the
water.
disease.
Horrible
Outside
Everything
of the
that
sun.
he had heard was yoga.
Or just
His
another
body
part
was
of a
a
nice
cup
gift.
Dark
filled
oval of
was
a
a ship floating on the
Strings
water.
dropping down.
It was
Fish
music
arrows
that
genders
was
in the
in
surface,
space,
making a
filled.
break for it.
and space
Just
that
Break on
another
the
allowed music
ordinary
surface
to
of
flow
water.
down.
occurrence
Not just
of
by the
living
ears, but
in
by
that
the
house.
body itself. And
The
suddenly,
tune
Tries
now
to
begins
toss milk,
assembling
breathe,
itself.
packs a
falling.
couple of things.
She's played later for teachers, for
Through
composers,
the
Toothbrush.
blink,
for music
first
Change
heard
your
directors,
bits and
clothes.
snatches.
of all the
Notebook.
falling
orchestras.
through his
Prayer
own
book.
life. Which was
Then
the
unfamiliar
material
now,
line
although
suddenly
the
becomes
told
clear
him
about
there's
watching.
static.
Music
Then everything
always
fades.
ephemeral.
The people
Always
that
the
were
end,
out
everything
everything
fades.
fades. And on the other
spent
side,
here and back at
down.
home in India,
And even
People
the
he had known for
recordings,
years.
she's
Whatever
just a
story
statement
he
of
had,
that
didn't
actual
really know
whole.
about them.
Against the history of his
Suddenly
absence.
and has to
become
Of his
back
own
real.
body. He
Music
hadn't
is
been there.
nested
Of the
there.
actual
Background
event,
voice.
only recounting what it was
Just
like
last
to be
week,
in that room.
he had watched his
Sadness.
wife walking to him.
Between static and static.
About
Unerased
Release
emotion,
regret
initiating
of
now
not
the
having
motion
been
of the
there.
pendulum.
Electric with the music, with the audience. Sonia. Audience
Somehow,
is an ancient
it wasn't even
Now
On the
racing
smallest
towards his
possible
fallen
scale. He didn't
father,
even know who
his
she
absent
was.
mother.
Audience.
He was
It
looking
was
at
terrible.
her.
Breathing
He
deeply
was
and
not
softly
anxious
in order
was,
to move
but
more
in
slowly.
death.
It was like he wasn't even
smoothly,
there. How
letting
guardedly
her
proud she
tread be
was
guided
of the
by
work
the
she had
sharpening
done.
breath
How
and
hopeful
out of his
to
And
prove
silence,
herself.
straining to hear
And it
through
seems
all the
like
static and
music
distractions of
barely
the world.
Now
focused
the
on her
evening
actual
of
life.
Life away with it.
He's
The
ashamed
pure
then.
sound of
Ashamed he
music.
never tried to share with her
Stops at the
his
kitchen
own
sink
hurt
on his
and
way out the door.
frustrations. How lost
Pour
he had
himself
been
a glass
feeling.
of water.
She
How
feels
unimpressive and
playing for
ordinary.
his old masters, playing
Never
for the
tried
Touches the
dead,
glass filled with
about his
Her
water.
body
experience in the
suspended
glass
in
of
time.
passion in the
Liquid,
morning.
he remembers.
Even
Quivering
now,
with
like
ghost
so
music,
rushing underground
struggling
where
the
it caused
world.
to stop. He hadn't thought to share this music.
the music
Now the
that
cello
wearing
is
started
gloves.
clear.
Here
The
is
other
where the
instruments
mind should live.
He
living
wanted it
through
for
An
air.
echo.
himself.
becoming
And shocking
stronger,
her.
becoming clearer,
Floating near the top of the skull.
Then shocking,
Not selfishly,
and now the
The
sound
listener
fills
yes,
itself up.
wanting something small.
Luminous. Iridescent. Delicately settling itself.
they're
And
Something
she
shaking.
hears the
secret
static
that was
fade.
only
Not
his.
in the
Then
dark,
fade.
Into a membrane of the world.
not removed,
He
in
wants
the
to
distance.
Like the
wire
sound
up.
of the
On a
ocean
stage,
fading in the
or in a
night
secret room,
distance.
but alive
Thinking about
She's
by
under
everything
it,
he
part of
never
the ear.
tried
between
to save
sound
the
and
joke.
He
silence.
loves it.
Then thinking
But
about
under
how
it,
the static
sound and
of
silence
the
circle each
turning
other,
could get
poured
from
future
together,
music.
and fill.
Still. The surface, still.
Silence fills Jody.
Wind. Her head
Divers
shifting
deep
back,
in the ocean.
the violin against her body. The bow held. A moment
Not wanting
explained
to
by
return.
physicists. Absolute potential. Everything is hushed.
Called rapture of the deep.
Nothing is moving. The hall
Rizwan pulls onto
is
the highway.
thick with silence.
Prepares for hours of
It's
not
solid
knowing.
on her skin. Hundreds and hundreds
He
of
whispers
people
to
are
himself.
suspended attached to her
wondering if
breath.
he'd return his sister's call.
They have
Thinking
composed
perhaps
themselves in
he
their
should,
seats,
but not
charmed
having the
themselves
courage
to
to die.
stillness, now attach themselves to her by sight, emptying their ears, holding their breath. The little box in her hands vibrating her bones out of the air, the ground, the hall. It's rocket science the way matter scrambles its way into molecules in space. Her hair, her breath, the violin, her hands, the people in front of her, all flying apart into space, turning into sounds. On her way to the hall, looking out the taxi window over the Hudson River, seeing over the surface of the water, in the setting sun, a group of birds, hundreds of them, a conference of them, launching themselves up from the piers, going crazy, whirling first one way, then another, thinking to herself, this is what the soul looks like. The dark sky unraveling into its constituent parts, birds, dusk, space.
Now alone in the evening, his hands are empty. Why not let them sing?
This is the
His
nature of
burden,
the world, she
world's
thinks,
empty
to
floor.
unravel and to sing. Remembering her early lessons,
Pratap is speechless at the
matter
sight of
and
her,
compounds
so
evolving
small
to their
and
parts.
far away on the stage.
This is
He
matter,
can't really
she thinks.
believe that he's
The
here,
bowl,
that he came.
the violin, myself, this hall, these people. We are the
He's
formed
speechless
matter of the
And
universe.
in the middle of his breath, afraid to let it go, that it will all be ordinary.
Music
Just now,
is a
he
natural
is the center
devolving
of the universe.
All
All matter is a flight of birds issuing from her.
what happens next?
All matter in the universe is inside that box.
What happens next is
I am a
this,
flight of birds.
Sonia thinks, breathing deeply. The
Collecting
moment
in
where I
my
tense
breath.
the bowl against the
And
strings,
everything in my
and
breath
everyone waits,
is
they
inside that box.
are in the moment of absolute restraint, perfect stillness, complete silence. Which, as Sonia
Jody
well
says,
knows, is not
reaches over to
silence.
turn the radio off before the concert begins.
Everyone rushed
Then
into
stops.
space at a deafening pace, minuscule and inaudible, but deafening.
Her hand hovering in space.
Everything the music can ever be, lying softly in that single moment. Every
Maybe she
single
will just
person in
listen
the
to the
room, she
concert while
thinks,
she
is
works.
here together at every single point in the physical
I just want to breathe,
universe.
thinks Pratap. It doesn't
All of
matter
us
if I
here
can't think
until
of
the
an
end
idea
of the
my
time,
own
which
without
is she
music
suddenly
or
realizes
yoga.
probably the same
It doesn't matter
moment
if
when
I'm
the very
ordinary,
first matter
or
of
if
the
I can't
universe
speak to
reaches.
Jyoti the way I want to, the way she wants me to.
As far as it will go before beginning to rush back together.
Jody returns to the table, to her homework for a course she is taking, trying
If
not
scientists
to
are
think
right
about
and the
the
universe
chores
is still
left to do.
expanding,
before bedtime.
then the philosophers are wrong. We couldn't be anywhere near the end of the world because we're still
All
drawing
I
in
have
breath.
to be able to do is begin.
We haven't
It
even
will
reached
be
the
easy.
pivotal moment. The moment of barely
How
held
long
breath
it
before
took
the
to
exhale.
get here.
That happy
Jody picks up
moment
her
from which
pencil and
music
calculator
proceeds.
and turns to her assignment.
The note.
She
Or
has
the
at least a
planet
few more hours before
behind.
Pratap comes home.
All this time is only the warm-up, thinks Sonia. Not the sun. The universe is still expanding, she realizes with some relief. We haven't even
Rizwan
begun.
smooths his hands across his face, reaches over, and flips on the classical station.
Then,
I want to
with the
breathe.
imperceptible motion, Sonia begins to play.
The universe is still
Still
expanding.
expanding.
Whisper your
Whisper.
breath
Softly.
Whisper.
softly.
The sounds in the ear.
Utterly unable to forget.
Forget.
We haven't even begun.
Sudden,
Sudden.
sudden, sudden.
The shadows in the room.
Yourself.
Could be
Could be
years.
years like
Years
that.
like that.
The
The
forgotten.
forgotten younger brother.
Like
and
that.
dark.
Here's the sound of flowers.
Momentary suffocation.
Flood.
Flooding
Flowers.
himself.
It seems she can't
Even remember silence.
Silence.
His father standing with him.
In the well of the nilometer,
the sun-edged
swoon,
The dark
black stone,
touched
by each pilgrim,
The skin
of a face.
and hands hardened.
The illusions.
offered by art,
And rivers.
Adrift.
in the sound.
Sound ocean.
We scattered your
Scattered.
stories.
scattered.
Stories.
Likewise, the
Five
five stations
all
all
sound
sound
the
the same to her.
Music could
Would
take him
back
back.
to himself.
The color of
Of
trees.
The body vibrating
Vibrating.
with the terrible scattering.
He could
He
speak.
could speak.
Low.
Long.
Bow.
Of
Light.
light.
Float
Floats
back.
back to the surface.
Then the sound of the strings.
Sometime
There's a moment.
a
A
sundial.
sundial in her chest.
She's filled.
She'll always be gone.
Now
Gone.
Gone.
each
Gone.
rib opens.
He
He leaves
leaves
a slip of himself behind.
and the orange painting.
On the wall.
He doesn't know what
What?
he believes.
He
The sound of the
believes.
strings in her fingers.
Her lips.
And
And
awareness of the empty
Empty.
space.
Does she drink from it? He will not talk about his own emptiness.
The
The rolling of
the
tires on the wet road.
His music.
Music.
His
His
life
life.
is a poem.
Or
Cool.
does it drink from her?
From her?
We are not only speaking instruments. The muffled
muffled
traffic
Billowing.
billowing.
Is music.
Music.
What would it be like?
To fall.
Fall.
To fall.
To fall.
World was ocean.
World was
Fall.
breath.
Breath.
He's in love with,
With
the illusion.
of
Stillness.
stillness.
Here's my life.
Gray sky.
Gray
Wet
sky.
sky.
Wet sky.
Wet sky.
Strangeness.
Violence.
Distress.
The garden was filled with the
With
rarest flowers.
When you try too hard to balance,
You will fall. The cello's
Cello's
the
the
instrument.
Closest in tone.
To the
To the
human
human
voice.
voice.
His day.
Unroll so
Unrolls.
plainly.
So
So
quietly.
So
plain.
quietly.
His heart was
So
filled.
quietly.
A photograph.
On the desk of a young woman.
She's
flying out of her life. Her
Her
body.
body.
Hot in his winter coat.
A rude haircut.
A single,
Perfect
perfect
flower.
He was
She
afraid.
The body is a house.
He has never heard anything,
Anything.
like this.
Like this.
A
Soft.
soft bell,
Bell rings.
rings.
You never
Never
thought.
Anything else would happen.
Through which the
The
spirit
spirit
breathes.
The music
Going
going
through
through
him.
him.
Still.
A flower.
Other
Other
than
than-
happiness.
Crumbling, opening themselves.
to their last
Last
experience.
experience.
A
Release into the spaces of,
Of
his
his
body.
body.
The moment she touches her bowl.
She
To the
touches.
strings.
To the strings.
We always.
Forget about
forget
breath.
Breath.
about breath.
Breath.
The last pain.
Finally.
Music.
His
Secret fears.
His plainness.
His ugliness.
He feels
Timeless.
timeless.
Went in front of this woman.
A stranger.
The days feel woven
Woven into a rope.
Suddenly.
Afraid.
To be well.
A song
About to burst open. He was
He was
pulling
pulling
himself.
himself
Into himself.
Into himself.
Into himself.
What if he hadn't panicked?
There is a cloud in his page.
You're brought back
A
to it
crowd.
breath,
by breath.
breath,
Breath.
Keeping secrets again.
Breath.
breath.
There was no answer.
He feared.
If you were a poet,
You could see it.
There's a book.
fortunes are read in,
The
The
grief
grief
freezes
freezes
her
her
solid.
Or burns.
burns
The long threads.
back to his mother.
The cloud
Along
along
her
her skin.
Imagine
Imagine.
the light
In your blood.
Imagine.
body.
She looked at the picture.
of her mother now.
Released
Now.
from the emptiness.
The bare
Branches
The twist.
of her life.
a thread that sews
The body to its life.
Imagined.
Her mother's voice saying her name. All the spaces open.
Open. The
wind
wind sings a
sings.
note through the glass.
Wishing,
Yet wanted less.
wishing he had wanted more.
He had more.
She's always allowed herself
To be mistaken.
Feels his bones opening.
A long road to walk on.
Dark circles of the unseen.
How about a book
Book written as
as
music. Icicles.
Curved to one side.
His
His
body.
body or water
water.
Body.
is a crack in the universe.
Crack.
One in which no,
No one knows the ending.
The edge of the house is
Cutting
cutting
into the sky's fabric.
He
Imagines
imagines
music
Filling
filling
those spaces.
The
The
years
year
of
of
listening and
not
not
listening.
listening.
How about a book?
That never finishes.
never finishes.
Snakeskins.
Stars,
Stuff.
buffaloes,
His own
notes,
Low.
spare.
despair.
Sweet.
Sweet.
The,
The
secret
secret
room
room
at the bottom.
of the sea.
Just drifts off.
To silence.
Off
Silence.
into
The pendulum.
silence.
suspended from the ceiling.
All matter is
is
flying?
flying apart.
No one knows who is playing.
Who's playing?
They are windows. A blue window that opens into
It's
sunlight.
sunlight.
Slowly,
Changing
direction.
directions.
the trees are bare.
His
Direct-
head is bare.
Bare. Still.
Still.
The surface
Still.
Still.
allows me to
To
see a ghost. All of their distance
Has
has
been
been
years
years
in the making.
The long yellow
Yellow
sound
The bed.
Dead.
of the sound.
the bed
Suspended.
of the
Miles
sound.
above the earth.
In writing, you have to tell.
Bleak sky.
Molecules.
Achieving
Unbelievable
unbelievable
symmetry.
Her
Her
hair.
breath.
Breath.
The violin.
Her
My
hands.
In the middle of the night,
She had woken.
The
The
brilliant
brilliant
crystal
crystal
heart
heart
of
Of
a
a rough
boulder.
boulder.
He can't believe
He's actually going.
hundreds and
And
hundreds of birds.
Hundreds. To see the
the
breath
breath
Settle out of a body.
The slowly
breath settle.
swinging.
swinging.
Pendulum.
Everyone is the same body moving.
The dark sky.
Unraveling.
Water in
Sky.
an overfilled cup.
So long it has been
Since the secret.
First vow.
Spoke.
itself.
The
The
gold
gold
stars.
stars of the zodiac.
Painted
Painted
on
on
the
the
blue
blue
dome.
dome.
The
bow.
ball. The
The
violin.
violin.
My hands.
Myself.
This hall.
Just
before
before
it
it spills.
She'd rather be seized.
Skewered by sound.
Birds do
Skewered.
not take up space.
They reveal it.
They reveal it.
Everyone is rushing
into
into
space.
now
Now
alone.
In the evening.
The strings
of notes.
of notes.
Now thrashing up.
Fresh.
Underground.
Rush.
Rushing.
At every point
In the
in the
physical
physical
universe.
universe.
His hands are
Empty.
empty. Breaking.
The surface.
He hadn't thought to
Thought.
share.
Music. We haven't even reached the
Pivotal
pivotal moment.
moment.
Everything fades.
Fades. Fades.
On the other side.
How long
it took me to get here.
The moment of held breath before exhale.
Why not let them sing?
That moment
between static and
and
silence.
silence. Pratap
That
in
time
the
shall
autumn
open.
breeze.
The cave of spring.
His
Or
dream
is
of
it
leaves that
spring
wither.
that rings forth? Here's the
He can
book.
hardly bear
The
to stay
bird.
seated.
The ink start blooming. Sheets of tell. The bell. The
There are
notebook of
moments her
birds that
body was
clamor.
taut
The
so
mountain.
raw
Open
with
thyself
motion
up
that's
and
still.
pray.
he
Hardly
exhales
past the first
suddenly,
day when the next
involuntarily.
day,
He
when
knew her
music
the moment
opens
she walked on the
spatially.
stage. When the
But it's a
orchestra
dream
settled
that
around
examines
her,
the doctor.
birds' wings,
The
the eye
wide
of a
river that
hurricane,
leaves.
the secret room,
The mystery
a
of
room
pi.
from which all music
Also the
emanates.
exact ratio
but
of
in
the
which
river's
nothing
actual
happens.
length of linear length.
Why doesn't he have a room
It's a
like
mouth,
this now?
but for what?
A room of his
Music
childhood,
mouth, only
with
platitude
incense
and
and
progressions.
icons. The concert is in the
On
room
the
with
bed,
him.
she imagined
A
herself
physical
dust,
blanket of
dust
air
from sunlight.
that dreams,
motes of dust,
not the air
and
that
sunlight.
dreams, he thinks, but the violin bow drawn across the sternum.
Motes of
sound.
separates the body. Imagine sunlight beams hacked, arranged
Awakes.
in vase.
I want to
A
wake,
poem
quite
reads
suddenly,
herself
in the middle of a
backwards through
piece.
time.
Pratap
Sonia
rises to
is
his
a
feet,
bell ringing
alarmed
backwards
and
through
breathless.
time.
The music is too loud inside him.
On the
Vaguely
wall, an
remembers
orange
Rizwan
painting
speaking
that
of the
fills
body's
her.
cavities.
Now, she is a glass overflowing. What can she say?
Now sure that he is flooded,
Drink from her.
and flooded.
There is a place
his
inside
Pratap
so
boat
still
is
the
battered.
music cannot enter.
He lies
Joanna
down
on
at
the
the bottom
boat,
of the
burning
boat,
books.
lies
Tifo
down
on
and
the
holds
boat,
on to the
running
edges
for her life.
as the deluge dawns.
Annie
If he
having
breathes
locked her
now,
husband in the
He
closet.
could drown.
Lily finishes the painting at last.
He
The rock
excuses himself
strains
now
cut
down the
across
road,
the ball.
stepping over everyone's
Sonia
feet to
in
get to
flight.
the aisle. The
What's
music
left
is
to
against
remind
his
you?
skin, his cheek. He
Not
could
the
fly
music
apart
that's
into
played.
sound at this moment.
But the me
He feels like
you always
falling.
listen for,
The feeling
The
as the heart
unstruck
plummets
sound,
that it will
the
be
clanging.
received.
or is it
Now in the
waves
aisle, her
flying
sound is
on the
frenzied, and he wished he could turn to her, open his mouth, and sing.
Or bees
He smiles in the dark,
arriving to hive.
turns to her. opens his mouth,
Here,
sings.
Sonia fretful. Here, Sonia flame, entire my life. Here, GB.
This is
Jody
the dream
tries
of
to
my
remember
breath,
what she imagined God was.
of traveling to the beginning of time. And then
There's
to
no
the
time
end
for
of it.
prayer in her life and no space for it to happen in.
Being present at the Big
Her
Bang.
mother taught her how
and
to
then
perform
when the
bougie
body
devotions,
disappears.
and here she was,
What could you
a
say
grown
that's
woman,
before
not
and
praying,
after?
not teaching her
How
children
does one
either.
love and not breathe? This
Jody
is the
realizes
waking moment
bleakly,
when Rizwan could see the sentences of
I am the
fire
completion of my mother's alienation.
written on the
God
far
is
wall of
everything
his
her mother
bedroom
taught.
when he'd
What
remember
about
the lines
garbage?
of frost etched on his windshield.
What
and
about
think,
crazy people?
That's art. But if that
That
was
is
art,
God too, said
then
Jody's
how in
mother.
despair he was at barely being able to create. All the
What about an
excuses
empty
he had
room?
come up with for not telling his parents.
What about
It killed him
silence?
to know this. There is never
That
a
too
right
is
time
God,
to do this.
said her mother.
Even worse,
Jody looks around her
there's too
kitchen.
much
How could
happening
all
in our
this
lives
also
to
be
deal
God?
with this.
You must
The
pray
worst of it
every
was that
day,
his life was
her
a
mother had
failure,
told her.
a closet full of paintings no one would see. He created
But
his
what if I don't
paintings
feel
for himself,
anything while I'm
lived his
praying?
life for
Asked
himself, but it
Jody.
wasn't good enough. He took this
That
faith
time is the
as
most
proof that
important
he
time
wasn't
of all
a
to
true
pray,
artist.
her mother said.
The miles were
How could
unrolling
nothing
between his
be
father
God?
and himself as silence had unrolled. When he heard
This
that he was
too
sick,
is God,
he was
she heard
sickly
her mother
revealed he
say
would not
against
have
the
to bear
afternoon,
his father's or his mother's
against the
death.
music and threads, each note
Was it
contained
Diego
in it
Rivera
what's
who said,
after.
I do not make paintings because
Once
I
you
choose
learn the
to,
chords,
but as a
you
tree
can hum a
makes
song
fruit.
you haven't yet heard.
It is a biological function.
Jody gets up,
Still,
goes to the
as he
closet,
drives,
rummages
Rizwan's
around
insides
among the
hum.
boxes.
The hum's been running through him all day. Through the earth, too. It's not
The
mysticism.
radio's mad with the
That's
music,
science.
and she's wishing God was in
He's
her hands.
devastated and done.
Lakshmi or the cello itself, it doesn't
He
matter.
hasn't done anything in his life.
The cello is a boat.
He's shocked.
Jody
to
is
think
rowing.
that.
The strings
All
are
the yoga
unturned,
he's
the
taught.
bow is loose, but
All
still,
the paintings that he has
she imagines
after
she
all
could bow
mattered.
a single note.
Sonia is exhausted after the concert and shocked. As always, barely standing and surrounded by crowds, she tries and tries to speak, but finds herself nothing to say. Better to just listen, ask questions, notice what other people say about the music. But her head's finally empty. She wants a drink of water and a day of silence. Then, in the back of the crowd, standing and looking at her, a thin man. His skin, the darkest, richest brown Sonia's ever seen. Immediately, Sonia remembers a dream she always had. A trip to Kerala to study South Indian classical music. A trip she had cancelled when she was offered the position in the orchestra, when all her language turned to poetry and music was the only way to speak. The man hovered at the edge of the crowd, awkward, nearly frightened. His dark eyes, pools of black. She remembers that pool in Hindi means flower. Small and thin-limbed, like a boy who has never grown up. A shock of strong fear. Men who still look like boys, thinks Sonia, suffer some terrible loss. The death of a parent or sibling. He was following the conversation, wanting to be a part of it, but was afraid. She's trying to catch his eye, but he is shy and looks at that person next to her. And then one of the staff takes her elbow, whisper her in the ear about the car, and when she turns back, he is gone. When she looks around, he's hurrying away down the stairs, but she can't get away from the group she's talking with. She watches him leave, feeling the river of sadness she spotted up flow from her throat down her chest and disappear into the wells of her bones. Music is like that, she thinks sadly. It sings once in the world, and then it is gone.
This is Jodi's music. Work. When winter, when willful. This day woven into weeks of others. The bone-tired feeling that goes through her at the end of the day is her 35-minute commute. Stopping for gas, thinking about her oil change. When she doesn't have enough money, she settles for half a tank. Her bank card revoked last year for a bounce check, though she begged the bank manager not to do it. Kept it a secret from Pratap because she couldn't imagine her own mother being so careless. Jodi remembers having no conception of wanting more than what Pratap could give to her. He was very quiet, affectionate with the children, but so reserved, even with her. After a few years, she didn't remember that once she wanted more. More as the rain falling, Pratap getting lost somewhere, coming home late from work today, how lost she felt that morning when she hugged him goodbye and felt no pressure back. He wasn't even there, she realized. He was a ghost. She can't remember a conversation they had that wasn't about business, like, did you pay the car insurance? Or, I'm going to be coming home late tonight. If our story were a book, it would be boring, she thought. And without an ending, we are the supporting characters who drift off the stage before the final scene. It's not even that, thinks Jodi. There is no climactic scene. She turns the radio off. The concert was over and she hadn't realized. No difference between the white noise and applause. How does it feel? She wondered. To sit on a stage, glowing, but know somehow your transportation through music must end. What does it feel like to put your instrument back in its case and leave the hall ordinary?
Now, I'm here, thinks Rizwan, pulling slowly into his parents' driveway. He had to follow the directions given to him by his sister. He'd never been to this house before. His parents moved last year to a smaller house. Here I am, he thinks, lonely and here. He sits back in the seat and closes his eyes. What's happening in the house? He sees lights on and some motions behind the shaded windows. He remembers the softening of Pratap as he adjusted him in class, and then the stiffness in his own back after hours of driving. He wants someone's hands on him, adjusting him gently. His body, that like his father's, was in danger. He looked again into the house. Was his father still alive? What would his mother's voice sound like to him after all this time? Why should I take my mind off this? Why should I be afraid of this sadness? He cried in front of Jodi so easily. Wanted to hear his mother's voice very much. The spaces in their conversations resounded with everything Rizwan wasn't saying. But just her voice, the joy of hearing it played harmony to whatever she would say to him. The sky was turning orange now, darker and darker. Like a painting he once made. now long since lost or given away to someone. He finds his cell phone in the side pocket of the door and dials a number. He hears the phone in the house ringing, and then his mother answers the phone. Ma, it's Rizwan. I'm outside.
Pratap lingered outside the concert hall, ashamed that he hadn't the courage to say anything. He wrote a letter in his head, a note folded up into paper airplane and tossed into the wind. It went like this. Dear Sonia, I have nothing to write. I have never heard music in my skin before. Have never heard before time unfolding itself. My ears unfolded. Never before in my entire life nothing but music. But he knew he could never write such a letter. As the letter's words collapsed into incomprehensibility, the idea of the letter as a paper airplane changed into a living bird, launched into the air, and flew away. I can still feel it though, he thought. It's not just the thought, it's the actual. The long roads of warmth streaming out the door in every direction. Here's the cave under his ribs, or the one that leads him away from here. Another train leaves this house, getting him upstate in 2 more hours. Then a 30-minute drive home, and then 8 hours of work the very next day. That's the actual. That's how music settles itself into the skin. Not in silence or reverie, but in a day stretched long and anger and tight, full of racket. Still, Pratap measured his heartbeat and breath against the long sound of traffic. Caves opened by sound, deepening the seam between himself and the frustration with the actual world. It made him feel removed from his life, made him want to work harder to be actually in it. Suddenly, he very much wanted to catch the train. He very much wanted to write the letter to Sonia Chang. No matter how the sound. He would catch the train, be borne home in the loud dark, creep quietly into the house, climb into bed next to Jyoti, and stare at the moon out the window, trying to work out what he was going to say to her in the morning when they both woke.